All right, cheers. All right, guys. So yeah, I've been here before, so I think a lot of you guys have already heard my talks before. If not here, around, I do a lot of talks at different locations and different areas, especially in the Philippines and the esports scene here, and particularly for like personal development and generally psychology-based things. So today, I was asked to talk about like the stigma in gaming and esports and the way that perhaps it's viewed and how we as participants can maybe avoid this or maybe help uh, change the outlook and change how people view esports or games in general or gamers, I should say in general. And it's a very complicated topic. It's very complex. So hopefully today we can sort of break down the fundamentals associated with stigma and what it causes. Okay. So, all right. So, firstly, before we start, I just want to quickly, for those that don't know me, quickly talk about um, a little bit about my experiences and what I do in the esports world or in general. So in general, I'm a sports performance consultant. So I generally work with different athletes. So on the left, we have Mark Striegel. Some of you guys might not know him, but he's UFC fighter, ONE FC fighter, um, and he was the URCC champion here before he went to UFC. So I generally work on him to help with his performance. In the middle picture, we have I forgot her name, but she was Miss Universe, Katrina Gray, and I was helping her with some stuff in the past before. But on top of that, I generally really like educating and teaching because I believe that education really is the key to perpetuating any advocacy or to make real change. You really have to educate people. You really have to develop the grassroots. You have to make sure that the more knowledge there is, the more accurate information there is, the better it is to move things forward. So on the right is just a picture of me lecturing at UP for some sports related stuff. So I generally get called up a lot in esports because at the moment there's a very big disconnect between like when people look at normal sports versus esports and all this kind of stuff. Whereas I'm sort of involved in both. So I have a I wouldn't say better understanding, but I have more experience in dealing with both, so I can communicate to people more efficiently, especially to the general public or people that don't understand gaming that well. The importance of it and why we love what we do, and how we can help our field grow, and how it can help people that are not in gaming or esports also to help them maybe grow or enjoy themselves and help to like this bridge this gap of understanding that we generally have. So in the past for the esports related stuff, I was the mental health coach for Team Liab in their preparation for the SEA Games before. So I worked with all their teams before that, and I also worked with Mineski events team to help manage and put out some gaming events. So PUBG, the SEA tournament back in 2018, and Frag Fest, which is like an FPS shooting tournament that was hosted in SM. So I worked on the esports stuff. I've also done translation work because I'm Vietnamese living in Australia, so I speak Vietnamese. So generally, when like Vietnamese teams come over here to compete and stuff, sometimes they ask me to come as a translator to help out, fill out the forms and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty involved with the field, and I'm generally out and about with a lot of the people in the industry here. And on top of that, of course, a lot of people get me to talk about the esports psychology workshops. Okay, so what are we going to run through today? We're going to brief outline of today. We're going to run through the stigmas in gaming. Like what is a stigma? Like you've heard the term, but what does it mean exactly? What causes stigma and how it happens? We're going to talk about stigma and choice, and we'll go about it in a bit more detail. We're going to talk about prostitution and how it's portrayed in media and Hollywood, and hopefully it gives us a better understanding of what a stigma is. We're going to talk about the factors that cause stigma and maybe how we can avoid them or how we can address them. And then lastly, we're going to tie in all these fundamentals with the most important part, stigma in gaming. once we go through all the concepts. We're gonna talk about how we can move forward and how we can change the perception that a lot of people have, which is actually a very big problem in the Philippines, more so than in many other countries. And we'll talk about why it's a bigger problem here, perhaps, than in other countries. Okay. And the reason I'm using this like weird app thing is because I can doodle on it, and it makes it more interactive and a lot better than just putting a general slide through. All right, and then we're gonna finalize with question time. Of course, at the end, it's going to be about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you guys have any questions during the talk, feel free to write your questions down, and I can answer them there. If I don't know the answers to any of the questions, I can look it up and get back to you, because it's a very, very complicated topic. So I'll try my best to answer all the questions that I can. All right, so let's go through with stigma and what is stigma. And I always love doing a Google search, because Google search tells us what like the most general, most basic definition of things are and how people interpret it. And generally, a stigma is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. So, of course, in gaming and games in general, there's a lot of associations with gamers. You know, we associate gamers with poor posture. We associate gamers with, you know, maybe being stuck in their bedroom all the time. They don't like to socialize with people and all this kind of stuff. Maybe not us as gamers, but definitely the general public, when they look at gamers and how they perceive us, is very, very different. So it's very unfair in lack of better word to describe it. Like if you just play games or you're associated with gaming and stuff, that you just get treated unfairly, and there is some factual evidence that supports this. But the problem with racism and stigmas and prejudice and all this kind of stuff is that it doesn't apply to everyone. So just because you play games doesn't mean necessarily that you're associated with a lot of these traits. Of course, gaming does lead to issues health-wise. It's not the most healthy for your body, etc. But that's not the same for everyone. And specifically, we're seeing it a lot in professional esports teams, and my work here in the Philippines is people are really taking note of this, and they're really trying to advocate for changes in, diet, changes in how long you should be playing for. And we're really trying hard to make these changes, but it's unfair that these are still associated with all of us, that we have all these problems with us. And so how do we address this, and how do we change it? So we want to break it up further. Like, what's the difference between, prejudice, racism, and stigma? And conceptually and fundamentally, they're pretty much the same thing. It's just the unfair treatment of something just based on lack of understanding, etc., etc. And that's very easy for us to understand when we think about racism. The real difference, at least from a psychological or a medical perspective, is that when we look at stigma, we generally look at conditions. So the research behind it is like, generally people that have stigma or are subject to stigmas are people, for instance, that have HIV, or people that have mental illness and stuff. And then so we generally associate maybe people with HIV as being, people that are not careful, they don't take care of themselves, they fuck around a lot, whatever words you want to describe it as. But that might not be the case. So that might not be true at all. Like HIV, you might have been infected just by working in hospital and getting a needle stick injury, and unfortunately for you, you got it. You might be very careful, and you don't have those traits of messing around a lot and all this kind of stuff, but you're still associated with it. So generally, when we look at stigma, we look at conditions. Whereas when we look at racism and prejudice, the study is done on groups of people. So it's like, how are African Americans treated differently to white people? So it doesn't look at like the condition itself for the individual, but it looks at groups of people. But fundamentally and conceptually, they're the same thing. So when we talk about stigmas in gaming, more of the information that you're going to find that's relatable and probably more applicable to you is to look at research on racism and on prejudice. So if you want to understand more about how to maybe address these problems, you can look at it. You can look for more research on the racism side of things rather than the stigma side of things, because you don't really suffer from like a condition of gaming. You don't really get infected by gaming. It doesn't really have a specific person that that has that problem. It's more like a group of people that play games collectively. We have problems, or at least that's how it's interpreted by the general population. So keep that in mind. That like even though generally the term stigma can be misused a little bit when you're looking and doing your own research, make those two case distinguishments between stigma and racism, so you can learn more better for yourself. But the good thing I like about looking at the side of stigma, which is what we're going to focus on today, because racism is an easy concept to understand, is stigma is very internal, and it's more fundamental because we look at the person with the condition, so we can address the problem more specifically, which is what people generally have more lack of understanding. So I want to go through that in more detail today. Okay. If I'm going too fast, let me know. A lot of people have problems with my Australian English, so I'll try my best to slow things down. But if I do go too fast, let me know. Okay, so generally we can split up stigma into like 4 different levels or 4 different components that cause it. So we can look at it from a public or societal level. So that's how, like, you know, the public or the general population looks at a specific problem and how they address it. So how does the general population generally look at gamers? You know, maybe geeks, maybe nerds. We don't go out much. Maybe we don't see sun, they're all pale. Like if you get, you know, a person that doesn't really understand our field, general population, to draw a picture of gamers, that's generally how it's going to be. And then on the second is a self or personal level. And this is very interesting when we look at marginalized and niche groups in particular. And a lot of gamers don't know that, or a lot of people that play games don't know that we ourselves perpetuate this image and this stigma. A lot of the causes of the stigma associated with gamers and gaming in particular are caused by us ourselves, and we don't even know that we're a problem of it. For instance, like a lot of the times, you know, we will go out and we have this desire to get RGB or to get gamer chairs or gaming gear or all this kind of stuff because we ourselves want to be seen like we're a gamer. And realistically speaking, none of this has an impact on your ability to play games or your enjoyment in games at all, realistically speaking. But it helps perpetuate this image of what a gamer is. And that's actually a very, very big problem that we see, because what it does is it makes this like social divide where it's like a normal person can't relate to a gamer as much because they see us as like a totally different species almost because of all these things. But fundamentally, this isn't what, you know, makes a gamer at all. It's just, do you enjoy playing games or not? It's not even being pro esports. It's none of that. It's so the problem is not only external of how the public interprets us, but the problem is also us. And so we have to address internally and fix our own problems before the public can interpret us differently. And we'll talk about that in more details and make some comparisons later also. The next one is structural or social structures. And these are how images are framed. And by image framing, I mean like in the media that is produced out there, in maybe rules in your company, and different sort of like laws in place. So there's 2 examples I want to put up. One is like you're working in a specific business that bans mobile games, and that's actually something that's happening a lot in at the moment, like or bans Mobile Legends or all that kind of stuff, because there's an association with mobile games and unproductivity. So yes, I understand that it's a good thing for the company, which a lot of companies actually do, or Facebook, for instance, and all that kind of stuff. It's good because it helps the company be more productive. But the bad thing is it frames gaming in a bad sense. It frames gaming as the cause behind unproductivity, and it doesn't frame the true cause, which is procrastination or just boredom of the job or whatnot. And so the problem is now you have an association with computer games or gamers in general with being unproductive, and that's a problem. The second one is how it's portrayed in media, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail later. But media is very, very important because the news that's put out regarding it very highly affects the way that the general public thinks. And we'll discuss that in more detail later of how that can cause a lot of issues. So it's very, very important for content creators to be mindful of how they put out their content, such that there's more of a positive outlook on what gaming is. And the last one, which is very interesting, is courtesy stigma. And personally, for myself, I haven't experienced too much of this, but I'm not around my family too much because they're in Australia, and most of my friends are in the industry, so I don't really feel it that much. But in other conditions, you generally see this a lot more, and this is stigma associated with family and friends and associates of the individual. So, for instance, you have a partner or your boyfriend or girlfriend, whatnot, has HIV. I keep using HIV for example because I used to do research on it. And the condition doesn't affect you because you don't have HIV, but your partner or your family member does. But your family friends and your associates treat you differently because of a family member that has a problem. So it's not even you that has the condition. It's how family members and peers are treated because of the condition of another person. And so we sort of see this a little bit in gaming, but generally it's not as much of an issue. Probably the only issues that I can sort of see associated with courtesy stigma is when maybe children of their family want to pursue a career in gaming, and then your tita or your tito or whatnot are like, why would you let your son or daughter study that or do that kind of thing? It's a waste of time, etc., etc. And then they sort of judge the family for that. So that's probably the biggest problem that I see in gaming, especially here in the Philippines. But if you guys have any other ones, let me know too, because it's everyone has their own experiences with this kind of thing. So it's very good to list it and note it down, because of course it's such a new field, it's such a new industry. So it's good that you guys yourselves can put your opinions out there to get as much information out there, especially in this very early phase where we're still learning a lot about it. Okay, so we're going to look at why are some things stigmatized and why are some things not stigmatized. So for instance, computer games are generally stigmatized. Being a prostitute, for example, is stigmatized. And doing drugs is stigmatized. But some other things, like looking at diseases, why is cancer not stigmatized when cancer is arguably going to be a lot more detrimental to you than HIV? Because with HIV treatment, you pretty much not only do you not infect other people if you take your medications regularly and on time, you're pretty much a normal human being with no condition, no problems, and very little side effects from things. But why is it that HIV is stigmatized and cancer isn't? And generally, one of the big key defining factors is choice. So people perceive that if you have a choice over something, then you can be blamed for it. And that's sort of what stigma is. You're sort of, attributing their circumstance to choices that they make. So you might say someone is fat because they like to eat junk food and stuff all the time. But then if you find out they have a medical condition that causes them to be overweight or obese or not, then it's fine. They don't really, judge as much, and you don't really stigmatize, you don't prejudice against them. So a great example that is classically used in Hollywood and portrayed in media is you have a prostitute there, and then the first scene will generally be her having sex with some guy or something like that, getting paid, etc., etc. And then your media feeds it into your mind that this person is a prostitute, this person is a slut, derogatory term, insert, etc., 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 and that they're dirty, essentially speaking. It's not until a few scenes later that the mom comes home to her kid and buys the kid dinner, takes care of the kid, is a loving mother, etc., etc. You find out that the prostitute is doing it because they don't have any options in life. So they're doing it to feed their family or something like that. And then so you don't judge them as much anymore because they don't have a choice. They're doing this because that's the only option that they have, and they're powerless. That's why they're doing that. And so you don't stigmatize them as much when you learn about that thing. And that is a very interesting thing conceptually, because it doesn't change anything. Like, the act is still the same. She's having sex and she gets paid for it. But your outlook and the way you interpreted it has changed. Like, now if someone was a prostitute by choice and they chose to be a prostitute, and they're like, yeah, I this is my career, this is what I do, and this is what I get paid for it, you would perhaps judge them more because of whatever culture that you come from that generally views prostitutes differently. So there's the only thing that really changed is that your perception that this person had a choice over something changed, and because of that, it changed your perception of the person themselves. But it doesn't make a difference. Like, if you talk about, like, say you're dating this person, you're dating a prostitute, for example, the danger to you is the same. Like, the risk of STDs is absolutely the same, regardless if the person was doing it by choice or not. The way they act might be the same. Their personality is exactly the same. Everything is the same. But just the fact that they're doing it by choice or not has changed the way you look at things. So choice is very, very important. So a lot of the times we ourselves have to sort of rewire our brains to not judge people as much, or at least the general public. So we can say that this is a very big problem, because it's very hard. Like, fundamentally, we judge people, and that's how humans have learned to get by. If you subscribe to the evolution theory and all that kind of stuff, you know, like, you see a rock and you're like, is this food? And you judge it, as not being food. And over time, it's gotten more complexity, and the judgment is really about danger or benefit to you. So when you judge something, you're looking at the danger of something and the benefit to you. So when you look at a prostitute, you look at the danger and the benefit to you. But when we look at something, for example, like the Hollywood prostitute, where she's taking care of a kid or not, we view it differently, because we learn more information, and that's why it's very important, because the more information we know about something, the less likely we are to judge it unfairly. So we want to get that concept through, that education and knowledge is very, very important, and that choice has a very big impact, especially if we perceive. It's not even if the person has a choice or not, but if we perceive that the person has a choice or not, that's what causes a big effect. So it's choice perception rather than real choice. For instance, drugs and all that kind of stuff, we perceive them as having a choice to take drugs, etc., etc. All right, so this was a slide that I took from a very good talk about stigma, and a lot of the concepts in the talk today came from that talk. If you want to look for it, you can follow this URL here. For the Center for Health and Safety Culture, you can just YouTube it, and it will come up on the search bar. It's a very, very good talk. So we have this continuum where some things are perceived as having low stigma, and some things are perceived as having high stigma. And these are the factors that might cause it. So if you have something that you can hide easily, for example, you know, HIV, if you don't tell anyone that you have HIV, etc., etc., then it is lower on the stigma continuum, because if people don't know, then they're not going to show it. Of course, this leads to other problems in terms of honesty, and it causes other issues, because by hiding it, you're perpetuating the stigma that it's something that should be hidden. In reality, you know, like, if you suffer a medical condition, so what? Like, how does that affect anyone else around you? But it affects the way people think. The second thing is the course, and by the course we mean how the stigma develops. So if we look at a different medical condition, for instance, HIV, we generally think that right now, if you have HIV, you're gonna become sick and then you're gonna die. Like, that's generally how we perceive it, but that's just not the case. We don't become sick from HIV and we die unless we don't have medical treatment. So because of that, it generally has a very it's higher on the stigma thing, and so when we look at the stigma altogether, it's a combination of all these factors together that outline it. So The next one is disruptiveness. Like, how much does it affect your life? So if we look at if you get sick, it's very disruptive if you do get sick. Or for instance, in gaming or esports, it's perceived as being very disruptive because it ruins your daily routine and all that kind of stuff. So this is probably more applicable to esports, where we find that it ends up being on the higher spectrum of the stigma continuum because it's more disruptive. The next one is aesthetic qualities. So like conditions such as like having a wart on your face or having a mole on your face or something generally has higher stigma associated, or being fat, etc., etc., being overweight, being obese. These things have higher stigma issues because it just looks less aesthetic. So we have to also learn to separate the aesthetic problems, because humans have learned to judge things also, like I said before. Like if a tomato doesn't look good, then we don't want to eat it, because before, when we were not as intelligent and stuff, we might think that it was old, it was maybe sickly, not as nutritious or whatnot, it's not as good for us. So we associate aesthetically pleasing things with having better outcomes for ourselves, and that's just not the case a lot of the times. And this is a very big problem for a lot of things too, when hiring employees, all that kind of stuff. A more aesthetically pleasing person might get the job over a non-aesthetically pleasing person, whereas the work output and the work outcome is totally different. So the more knowledge we have over things is very, very important. And we have to try to look at things without bias. The origin of stigma, generally less important for gaming. But when we look at the origin, for instance, the origin of HIV is associated with sex, for instance. The origin of different stigma is associated, like, for instance, COVID, the origin is associated with Chinese people and bats, etc. So then there's racism towards Chinese people because of that. We'll go over in a bit more detail about that, but it's very straightforward regarding that. And the last one that we're talking about is peril. And peril pretty much means how dangerous it is to yourself. And so when we look at gaming, we don't inherently think that it's dangerous, right? Like, how is me playing computer games dangerous to people around me? But this one is the big one, and I really want to emphasize this one in the Philippines, because it's very hard for people to come by money in the Philippines. I'm sure we all know, and even myself, I'm finding it very difficult during times with COVID at the moment and everything. So actually, I'm relocating out of my my place soon because of that. But one of the biggest thing is the financial aspect of getting a job in the Philippines, and a lot of people, they want this sense of security, this sense of financial security, etc., etc. So they look at gaming as something that is perilous. It's dangerous because it takes away your time to be productive. It takes away from your potential to make money. You're not going to go to a family gathering, etc., and your aunt's going to be like, "Look at my son. He's so successful. He plays computer games." Like, that never happens. Like, they're never very proud about that because of the association of it. So when we look at the Philippines, there's like high danger levels associated with computer games, not only from that aspect, but also from the investment aspect. You have to buy computers, you have to buy the gear. It's actually quite expensive. So they associate it with something that's dangerous. And we have to alleviate or remove this sense of danger associated with it if we want to progress forward with how we look at and perceive gaming in a negative light. So here's a very simple thing that I've outlined out. Okay, so COVID, it is a virus essentially, and people believe, although we've looked into it, and it's not only bats, it's other animals too, but for simplicity's sake, people associate it with a bat, then they associate it with Chinese people, and then they associate it with Asians, and then no one really associates it with humans in general, but this is where the level of most people are at. I say most people because some people are questionable. But yeah, so this is where it's at. And so, like, white people in America, I don't know if you've been hearing about the problems over there, have been, beating up Asians in general. They've just been beating up Asians. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Chinese or Filipino or Vietnamese or whatnot. You go out and you get smashed because of this association. And when you look at it deeper, it's like, okay, it's not even really caused by Asians. Okay, you can say that, yeah, sure, it originated more in China, but then really no one blames the bat. Why does no one blame the actual bat themselves? Like, no one blames the bat. So, because they think that, and this is the thing, and you actually see it in media, they have Chinese people had the choice of eating the bat. So Chinese people have the choice of eating the bat, and the bat had no choice because the bat's an animal. Therefore, the bat doesn't get any blame because the bat doesn't have any choice. The bat's just an animal and stupid, whereas Chinese people are smart enough to eat a bat or whatnot. So they blame it on Chinese people or Asians in general. And we see this because a lot of Filipinos blame Chinese people and bats and all this kind of stuff. But no one blames the bat itself. No one blames the virus itself. They generally have to link at something that has a choice, because you want to blame someone or something that had a choice to do it. Because if something had a choice, then that means it's beyond your power, or it's beyond the power of someone, and that makes people feel less empowered, which is very, very interesting. So it's like for religious people, if they can't blame someone, then the last thing that they would lead to would be like, it was an act of God, that God did this to us because it was meant to be, it was fated to happen, kind of thing. But really, none of that really matters at all. Like, what we should be focusing and targeting is none of this, because like, all of this, realistically speaking, was beyond our control. Like, how did the person even have a choice to know that this was going to happen? And there's a lot of racism that happens. Like, why do Chinese people eat bats and stuff? But a lot of Asian cultures eat bats. I mean, a lot of even European and Western cultures eat bats and other weird animals too. So it's not just about that, and it could have happened to anyone, but we associate it with it because we want to feel like someone had a choice and someone caused it. That way we can get some kind of self-satisfaction in playing the blame game. But really, it's quite unfair, and the focus should not be on what caused it or whatnot anymore. The cause really should be on how do we address it and how do we make it better. And so when you look at gaming, it's sort of the same thing that we see. Let me bring this back up. Can I draw still? Where is it? Okay. We're humans and we play computer games. Okay, so I just split it up into 3 groups. And you might go into console gaming, mobile gaming, or PC gaming, and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't really matter, not really, but we see it even within our own industry and own field that PC gamers would be like console gamers are not real gamers, and console gamers would be like mobile gaming is not real gaming, and all this kind of stuff. And then you have people that are like, oh, e-girls are not real gamers. They're just girls that are doing it for the money. They're just showing off their boobs, etc., 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 all that kind of stuff. And then some people who might further split it up into streamers and different subgroups and all this kind of stuff. But when we look at prejudice and stuff, it happens at all levels. And how stigma happens, it happens at all levels. So prejudice is a problem as a whole. Like, we want to be acknowledged and not treated unfairly or poorly, but we ourselves treat our own, not our own, but like people that have played mobile games or whatever, we treat them unfairly oftentimes. So like it is sort of unfair to expect that when it's just a natural response from people to judge things. So we have to fix it from the fundamental cause, fundamental roots, which is that we should be teaching people not to be unfair towards mobile gamers, not to be fair towards gamers in general, but to not be unfair in general and to not judge in general. And that's really how we get around it. So how do we get people to not judge us as much or be not as judgmental in general? Like, how do we get around that? So we call that concept perpetuation of, well, we don't really call it, but associated with that is the perpetuation of stigma. So how does stigma feed in on itself? What are the different things that feed into stigma and cause stigma to happen? And if we can understand this better, then maybe we can target the causes that can fix it and stuff. And of course, I spoke a bit about before the lack of understanding or human nature to be judgmental. Of course, we can try to educate people to not be judgmental and all that kind of stuff. But that's very difficult culturally to do. With a lot of Asian cultures in general are very judgmental, and a lot of, even like when we look at Western cultures in school in Australia, we're taught to be, never judgmental, never racist. I'm sure they teach you that kind of stuff over here too. And people try to keep very tight lips on that kind of stuff, but it still happens. Like, people are still judgmental. All it needs is one catalyst, like COVID, for instance, and now everyone is racist. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people are racist all of a sudden because of that catalyst. So it is inherently in human nature to judge things that are different and to lay blame and fault. And really that has got to do with human nature and how humans are sort of, we believe that we're like the center of the world, that everything revolves around us, so everything has a cause and stuff. But that goes really, really deep. We're not going to really talk about that. We can talk about the things that we can help to change, specifically in our industry, in our field. And the big things are language, education, and experiences. Okay, so with language, we want to choose words that avoid objectification and labeling. Okay, we want to choose words that cultivate we call like a distraction or a separation between it. So an example I'm going to give is like Jane has anorexia, or Jane is anorexic, is an anorexic. And these two essentially have the same meaning when you think about it, but it's interpreted very, very differently. So when you say Jane has or Jane suffers from anorexia, you think about it, Jane as a person and anorexia as a separate entity. So Jane is an entity and anorexia is a separate entity. And so you don't associate it as strongly with the person or the group. Whereas in the second one, Jane is an anorexic. So anorexia is like a descriptive word, but anorexic is a noun. It's a person that suffers from it. So you perpetuate this idea that the person is the condition themselves when they're not. It's sort of separated. They suffer from it, but they're not the condition. And that's a very, very big problem that we have, because in gaming, we ourselves perpetuate this idea that we're a gamer. We go out and we say, I'm a gamer. You could just say, I play games, but no one says that. They say, I'm a gamer, etc. And so this perpetuates this stigma also, because we ourselves push forward that we're this thing that's different. Like, I'm a gamer, I'm not a normal person, etc., etc., etc. And to us, like, it might seem like it's the same thing, but to another person that doesn't play games, it creates this divide. You're a gamer and you're not a gamer, etc., etc. Even within the thing, what's a real mobile gamer, what's a PC gamer, etc., etc. And so it's very bad, because in gaming itself, it's one of the things that self-perpetuates the problem itself. Gaming is one of those things, like, you see it too, like in racism against black people, for instance. Black people go around and say things like in their rap songs, like, I'm a nigger, da, 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 da. And then so white people look at him and say, oh, he's a nigger, da, 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 because they self-perpetuated that image in rap songs, etc., 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 which is bad. But it doesn't go to the extent of gamers, and gamers do it even more than that, and it makes it even worse than that. It's very important that we understand this, because even myself, even throughout this talk, I was referring to the term gamer, and it's not going to change with this talk. It hopefully educates you to maybe use it less, etc. But I don't think that it's possible at this stage to eradicate the term of gamer or etc., etc. But that's probably one of the important things that we need to do to create this better understanding of us. So we create this difference by calling ourselves gamer, and by creating this difference, we subject ourselves and we open the doors to be treated differently. So it's very interesting and very complicated, and I honestly don't know how to address this. Somehow, like, just ban the term gamer, but like, that's not possible. So we have to understand that and maybe help change that. So that's probably one of the biggest things that even like I didn't really understand it too much until like I was doing this talk and I was writing it up, and I was like, yeah, it's a really, really big problem for us people. Okay, the second thing that I want to talk about is education. And we have to understand that stigma and racism resist change, even though we know that, like, for instance, take an example like white people towards black people, even though there's a lot of education that goes out. Like just because you're black doesn't mean that you rob banks or you do drugs or like you all that kind of stuff. Um, you know that, but you still treat them differently because stigmas really resist change. It's a cultural thing. It's been ingrained through many years of belief, etc., etc. And so it takes a lot of time to be changed. And so we have to change this by fundamentally changing the way we internalize information and how we make assumptions on different things. And that's very difficult to do from a societal level. But for us, especially for you guys that are into content creation for our industry, it's important for you guys to put out content that tries to avoid these assumptions and tries to avoid these negative beliefs. Like avoid using the term gamer if you can, and try to make these associations with more relatable things. And the last one is experience positioning. And generally, we associate stigmas with different groups of people or different subgroups of people because of the experiences that we have. And a great example of that is COVID, because COVID has affected everyone worldwide really detrimentally. So we associate this experience of ourselves of detriment to a specific subgroup, such as Chinese people, such as Asians, such as whatever. But really, that has nothing to do with it. In gaming, this is important because a lot of the experiences in gaming is often very negative for a lot of people, especially with competitive titles. When you first start, you get called names and all this kind of stuff. So that leads to a very poor association with gaming. But we can make further comparisons with it to other sports to help understand it a little bit better. So when we look at like an image of gaming, I just literally Googled gamer and I screen capped it. This is the images that come up. Now, from a perspective of the general population, your grandma, your aunt, or whatnot, when they look at this, it's not very relatable to them. Like, it makes zero sense. It makes zero understanding. Like, how is this relatable to anyone? So, like I said before, like it creates this social divide, this social like division that opens up the doors to prejudice and concepts. And you see the image is typically a guy hunched over his computer, super focused on whatever. It's cool that they have some females in the picture, which helps the gender equality stuff. But from the the bigger picture and the bigger side of things, like how is this relatable to a normal person, and how does this look desirable by cultural norms? Because we're comparing these to cultural norms, so it's very hard to change the cultural norm, although doable, that this is acceptable. But we ourselves, because we're the smaller group, at least until the next generation dies out, etc., etc. But even amongst gamers, there's a lot of different groups. How do we make this as more normal? How do we make this more relatable for everyone? Because we have to meet each other halfway. We can't expect everyone to understand us, but at the same time look so different that it's hard for people to understand. We have to make ourselves more understandable, at the same time educate people to understand better, and that's how we meet at halfway. So like that's really like bad. Like how does anyone relate to that? So because of that, it's going to open the doors to prejudice. Okay, so I spoke about this a little bit before, but for content creators, and this is the big one, we want to provide content that doesn't romanticize things, that functions on facts and plans and realism, because that's what really or stability, I should add. That's what really helps people understand. So like you see so many articles online. So the first thing is like, for instance, like if you're like, oh, I want to be a gamer, and you tell that to your mom or dad, and they're worried about your career decisions, and maybe they're actually one of the more reasonable parents, and they're like, okay, sure, I'll go do some research on it. So then they Google career in gaming. Okay, and so when you bring this up and you see this image of careers in gaming, like sure, there's a couple that has like game tester, game artist, game programmer. It's all associated with the game itself. There's a picture of a guy sitting in front of a computer screen. There's a lot of esports tournaments and things. You see, the generalization is associated with computer games or games esports, which doesn't give the parent a lot of peace of mind because it's not very relatable. On top of that, when you look at articles or what's portrayed on the news media, it's like, oh, professional gamer wins, $2 million at TI or something like that. That's also not very relatable because it doesn't help the parent understand of what they can do for their kid. So instead, what we should be doing is instead what we should be doing is putting out articles that don't romanticize gaming. Like, oh, it's so hard to be a top tier gamer to make whatever $2 million to win, etc., etc. We should just be realistic about it. We should put out like more content that's about the industry in general. Like, oh, gaming is a booming industry. Computer games is a booming industry. It's produced thousands and thousands of jobs. There's a variety of different jobs that you can do, from marketing, um, you know, visual models, design, art, um, all this kind of stuff. And the career path is pretty straightforward. You go to college, you get a career, you do internship, like all that kind of stuff, and it helps people change lives, etc. Um, it doesn't seem so far-fetched for the parents to understand. It makes it a lot more understandable. So for me, for example, if I was to put out a piece of media relating to how gaming has benefited my life, I could just be like, my article will revolve around me building my company in normal sports. But at the same time, when I was first starting, I didn't have enough money to build the company starting up. So what I did was, and I still do it to this day, is I did this kind of stuff as a side gig, and I did it as a spare time, as a hobby, to de-stress from the kind of stuff. At the same time, I got reimbursed for it, and that helped me feed my mainstream work that I did. Um, and that way I was able to be successful on both sides of the things just by putting out a solid plan, and so gaming helped me a lot with that. And so something like that is inspiring to the normal person, as opposed to something like, this guy had to drop out of school, and like, for instance, taking Ana, like he dropped out of school to play Dota and all this kind of stuff. And then on top of that, like, his family just didn't approve of it. He had to go to another country. He has to go to like a gaming house. He has to like stay away from his family. But at the end of that, he won $2 million. But out of the many thousands of people, no one makes it. Like, how does that sound appealing to like a normal person? Like, how does that picture and frame us as gaming? And we know, because a lot of us do make an industry and make a living out of gaming and doing specific things related to gaming. But most of the content out there doesn't reflect that. It reflects all these like crazy romanticized stories and all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't give the general public peace of mind, nor does it let it relate to the general public. Because $2 million or a big prize pool doesn't relate to the general public. You could be like, oh, I play games on the side and I make a couple of $1,000s every few weeks, managing a team and playing games just like basketball or any other sport. Some article like that is way more relatable, and there's less stress and less danger and perception of stigma that we talked about before, all the different things that help perpetuate stigma. So putting out more content like that would definitely be a lot more beneficial for the industry as a whole. And I think that should definitely be put out there, especially with the problem in the Philippines with finances and all that kind of stuff. We should be putting out more content. That the only sport right now that is completely safe from COVID and people are still getting paid on a daily basis is esports, because it is completely immune sitting behind a computer screen. You're not exposed to it. And so that puts more positivity into it, rather than creating ourselves this 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 barrier that we put in front of ourselves to be seen differently, to be treated differently, which is very, very unfortunate, but it's very, very prevalent in the gaming side of things. Okay, the second thing is experience positioning. You want to provide this realistic and fun experience for like everyone. A lot of the times, I said before, like a lot of games are very high skill threshold. Like you take up playing a MOBA game for the first time, for instance, it's immensely hard. Like learning how to play Dota or League of Legends or whatnot, it's going to take you months and months and months. There's different heroes, and every hero has 4 skills. That's a lot of pieces of information that you have to learn to be able to start enjoying a game. And so it's not very enjoyable for people when they first start. So they don't really want to play that kind of stuff. So we really need games that are very fun, stuff like Mario Party and all that kind of stuff. That's or Wii Sports. Like it's intuitive, it makes sense, and we should associate that with gaming also. But we ourselves don't associate that kind of stuff with gaming. Like, oh, that's not a real game, etc., etc. But we should be associating games in general, because when we associate things that are more socially, not only socially acceptable, but socially more easy for people to do, that acts as like a bridge or a portal for them to maybe be like, oh, okay, I enjoyed playing Wii. Maybe I should play some other Wii games. And then they get into FPS on Wii, some kind of like shooting game. And because of that, they transition to maybe if they want to Counter-Strike on PC or something like that. But we have to open the doors for people by providing them with opportunities to learn and opportunities to be there. So like I said before, esports suffers from this self-perpetuation and stigma, because we ourselves cause it a lot. So we look at 2 big things. Okay, chess is essentially like something that not only works in real life, but is also an esport. It's converted to esports now. It's like you can play it on like computer and all this kind of stuff. But generally, the association with chess is like very positive. Like people are like, oh, people that play chess are intellectual, smart. They have a good time and they work hard and they're very disciplined. Whereas the association with gamers is not like that at all. And when you look at how like even just the competition and the tournaments are run and how it's experienced, it's totally different. This is not relatable. This is relatable. Anyone can relate to this. Oh, I can sit in front of a desk and with a friend over coffee and drinks, and we can have a friendly chat, and then we can move pieces of wood around. Like that's very easy for people to understand and very easy for people to get involved with. Whereas for computer games, this does not look easy for people to get involved with. How do you even start? Like even us in gaming, like how do we even start by forming a team and sitting in front of a computer? How did we get to this point? None of that is like makes sense. Like how to a normal person, like that is like so out of this world. Like how do you understand it? And because of that, those are the things that perpetuate stigma. So we should be progressing more towards this stuff. We should have articles, not in like these crazy types of sports clothing and all this kind of stuff. We should just have people in normal clothes having fun around a table. And that's how like you perpetuate these images that, esports isn't some like outrageous thing that people should like judge us about. Because that's not what it's about. It's not about the clothes you wear or anything like that. But like, in gaming, there tends to be that thing. Like, why do you need like this sports jacket? Like, you're not running a marathon or anything like that. Why do you need it? But that's what they do, and it creates this divide. So we have to really learn how to address it and change it, because it causes problems. I was going to talk about... Okay, spelled that wrong. Let's just eliminate that. I was going to talk about this if we had extra time, like gaming and the causes of violence and stuff. But
Yeah, definitely. We can actually spare like 5 minutes, 10 minutes for like a few questions.
yeah, sure. I can run through it quickly. And a lot of the times we're gonna think that the association with violence and gaming doesn't exist and stuff, and a lot of gamers in denial. But the truth is, it does exist. Research does show that playing FPS shooting games and stuff can cause a correlation with increased tendencies to be aggressive and stuff. But that's not what we want to look at, and that's taken out of perspective. What we want to look at is media in general that shows violence correlate to more aggressive behavior. And the answer to that is yes. Even reading books that have violence in it, even watching TV shows, all of that can lead to more aggressive behavior. And the problem with gaming is like people associate gaming as being immersive first person. That's why you feel like you're going to do it and act on impulse. But it's not really shown in comparisons to other types of media. What causes more aggression, and violence in media in general causes aggression. But you can say the same thing about what's portrayed on the news, about what's written in newspaper articles about violence and racism and all this kind of stuff, and all of that will cause the same thing. So it's not that uh, you know, gay first person shooters causes more aggression. It definitely does, but it doesn't cause it more than anything else that you would experience in. It probably doesn't cause it more than anything else that causes that has violence in normal games or normal media or normal books or even seeing it around. Like the bigger impacts are probably, and what people should be looking at is violence in your immediate household, like the people that are around you, definitely in parenting and definitely in schooling and your peers around you. Like um, the attribution of gaming to violence is going to be way less. Like it contributes maybe a very small percent, but compared to like having abusive parent, having abusive friends, being bullied and all that kind of stuff, that probably has a way bigger impact than in gaming, and that's probably where the focus should be directed. Um, I mean, playing computer games and it's not going to make you beat up Asians because of COVID. Like that's that's very unfair to put that out there. That could have been through anything. So that's the big key that I want to point out. Like I think that we have to acknowledge that all types of media that has aggression can lead to desensitization within ourselves and can lead us to perhaps be more aggressive. But the big thing is that anything can cause aggression in ourselves if we're not careful and we don't monitor it. So it's about getting a good understanding of yourself and getting good control of yourself and learning good behaviors and setting good examples. And that's really what prevents it. Gaming, I think like the big thing that people are worried about, particularly in gaming, is that they can start at a very young age. So you have like a lot of kids playing shooting games and etc. 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 So they're doing a lot of work with putting out like age limits on different games that they can't play, etc. etc. And those should be like that should be what's enforced. Like unfortunately, like books or novels about murder and mystery and stuff, they don't really have like age limitations. You can read it at like whatever age. There's no restrictions on that, but there should be harsher restrictions on that kind of stuff. Also, it's just that generally, like young kids can't read because they lack the ability to read something that complicated. So it acts as a self inhibitor. But things like media and gaming, it's the same thing. You need to have like age restrictions. You need to enforce that. You need to explain what's right, what's wrong. It's about teaching your kid. It's about education. So I think that's where more of the attention should be pushed. It's not that gaming causes violence. It's that just like any other forms of media, it needs to be controlled properly, and it needs to be regulated. So if not only in gaming but in media in general, there should be age limitations and stuff put in place to help people not develop these tendencies. And on top of that, we should be aware that there's a lot of factors that lead to aggressiveness in behavior. And these are just very small parts of it. But the bigger things that should probably change is just culture in general, that we should be, fixing aggression in culture in general. I mean, like, it's ridiculous to think that you can be racist and it's semi-socially acceptable in a lot of countries. Um, Even though people outrightly deny it, but the fact is it's very prevalent and sort of accepted, um, and that you attribute aggression to gaming and not that it's actually like sort of insane. So yeah, but we have to be aware that it does and can lead to uh, more aggressive tendencies. We just have to make sure that we're aware of ourselves. If it is perhaps causing that, then we need to be aware of it. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So in summary, conceptually, stigma is closely related to racism and prejudice. I would focus on this if you guys want to read more about that in general, and you can definitely draw conclusions from gaming and how to fix it. Uh, the gamer stigma theory is, yeah, like I said, more more close to racism and prejudice. Stigma is a lot more complicated and a lot harder. That's why I wanted to spend more time talking about it. But you know, if you generally look at the same things with racism and prejudice, you're on the right track with how to maybe address these problems in gaming. And the last thing is that relatability will help perpetuate a positive image associated with gaming. So we want to make sure that it's relatable to people. So put like an average guy, like a healthy, normal looking guy, and he's not a gamer. He enjoys playing computer games, but he makes money on the side, all this kind of stuff, and all the positive things. And speak about like just be realistic about it. Yeah, there's the romantic stories and all this kind of stuff, but have a healthy ratio that relates to the real world. So the real world is like most people don't go through that kind of story. Most people just, like us, just play games and we have our own careers and stuff like that. We enjoy what we do, and some of us work in the industry and we get paid, and it's not that insane. Like it's not like it's not nothing so crazy risky or anything like that. But we just have to push more of that out there rather than all these like fringe stories and all these statistical outliers. Because I get that it makes good content and it makes good views and all this kind of stuff, but it helps perpetuate this image of negative image and opens up the doors to prejudice and stigma. All right, that's pretty much it. So, do you guys have any questions and stuff that you guys want to ask?
Right, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much, Andrew. All of the questions are here asked by Indignant and Eratos. So we're probably gonna pick out a few questions to save time. The
Yeah,
first
go for it.
first one being, what do you think is a good method of distinguishing video game addiction from video games as a hobby?
Okay, so generally, when you categorize something as a disease versus something that is not a disease, so you could say like something like drug abuse versus drug use, like recreational drug use versus drug abuse. It's generally when it starts affecting your day to day life and affects your relationships or affects your ability to function. So, say you have like a normal day job, or you're a student, a good time to know that it's affecting you is when your grades start dropping, maybe your health starts dropping a little bit, or starts affecting your relationships with the people around you, etc., etc. Maybe you're not spending enough time with your family, you're not spending enough time with doing what you need to do. So that's why it's important, like especially like computer games and us pursuing the industry, we have to sort of spend quite a lot of time on it to be good. And that's the same with like any hobby or any skill or any sport or anything like that. We have to make sure that we allocate the time. And the problem why a lot of us don't improve as efficiently as we should if we want to be good at what we do is probably because we don't have a plan of action. We just think that playing a lot of games will make us better, but really you need to like it's a lot harder than that once you want to cross from the hobby side to the pro side of things, and obviously the addiction side of things too. So that's the big one, the one that starts affecting your life and affecting your health. That's when it's crossing to addiction. But the healthy side of, I won't say healthy is not the good word, but spending a lot of time can be beneficial if it's the career choice that you really really want to pursue. But you really have to be like systematic about it and put plans in place so it doesn't affect those around you, it doesn't affect your health and your grades and all that kind of stuff. You have to make sure that that's all there, and that's by spending very efficient time being good at what you do. But generally that's not fun for a lot of people. So being pro is very hard. Like my base, like for instance, example, like if I just play Dota casually and I don't study the game, my MMR is really low. It's like 3k or like high 2k 3k if I just dick around. But if I put a lot of time studying patch notes, trying out every hero and skill sets, I go up to like 5 or 6k. It's like a 3k difference if I study really really hard. um, but that takes a tremendous amount of work and I can't keep that up all the time. So it's very very different for a lot of people. And so it's something that is it's very hard. So you have to work out what causes you problems in life, and that's generally the line or the barrier that is from hobby to addiction. Okay, next question.
Right, awesome. Our next question, he actually requested to like ask himself. Yes, Jose,
Mm-hmm.
did you have any questions, dude?
Yes, sir. I have this question. Since there is this stigma for belief that esports or gaming in general promotes violence, what are your thoughts on this, and how do you help reduce or disprove this notion? Um,
Yep.
labels, how do we um, reduce that pressure? Like gaming in general promotes violence.
Um, I think that like I said before, it's related to making comparisons that people can understand. So I think like we should draw a lot of comparisons to make it more understanding to general media or general fiction or different things um, that people are exposed to. So for example, you can make a comparison like a few comparisons I made before, like reading a book causes aggression, but people don't have a negative association with reading books, right? Um, uh, Watching movies causes aggression with action movies and like all that kind of stuff. But then people also generally don't have a negative association with that too. Um, so there's two sides of it. One is you have to improve the image of gaming in general, and how so because generally when something is associated negatively, um, everyone's going to attribute everything negatively to it, and it's going to sort of like exponentially increase the severity of it. Even if you know um, gaming causes the same level of aggression as reading a book or watching some TV or something like that, people are going to make it seem like the worst. It's worse than it is when it isn't. So first is communicating to people that it's not as bad as it seems. Like uh, more people that read books and all this kind of stuff have more the same issues or whatnot, whatever the research says. I haven't looked it up specifically. But the second thing is improving the image as a whole. So you have to improve the image of gaming as a whole um, so that people don't associate gaming with like, because a lot of the times it's associated with gamers with being like sort of like introverts and locked in and social skills problems and all that kind of stuff. So we have to like fix that issue because people associate people with low social skills and all that kind of stuff as having like ADD, ADHD. They don't have the ability to have patience and all this kind of stuff, which is potentially true, but not a causation. So the cause is not gaming. The cause is not socializing enough, right? So this is like the previous question we're talking about, like addiction versus hobby and all that kind of stuff. Um, but so we have to like change that association by educating people, and at the same time we have to make sure that we put guidelines out for our own people on like how much they should be spending time doing, at what age they should be, and how many hours they should be spending on this kind of stuff, because kids shouldn't be spending like gaming isn't the issue that might be causing aggression in or the developmental delay in a lot of kids, for example. It's the lack of time socializing. But it's not computer games. They could be doing anything. They could be Facebooking. They could be just doing anything else and being antisocial, and then they don't want to develop social skills. So it's about us like understanding the problem a lot better and fixing it from all those angles. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, for me it makes sense as well. Like a lot of things have been cleared in this talk. Like
Yeah.
a lot of pain points have been addressed here, especially on the stigma on gaming. Because on recent events, there has been this debate in our school, and people have been agreeing to esports as a receptor to like violent people, or they've been basing on studies like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Dota players now are very violent, which isn't the case right now. So this would really help on clearing up stuff to like people who aren't really active in the gaming scene, and would
Yeah.
like change the stigma on gamers. I do believe in that. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
very much
Exactly.
for this talk, man.
Exactly right. Yeah. Like people need to separate the correlation versus causation a lot. So yeah, and I think it's not going to be so much as a problem next generation. It's just currently we're sort of like in this middle. It's still very new, but once we have kids and stuff, like I think that a lot of these problems will sort of like fix itself on its own.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that's it for now. We're gonna move on to our next speaker, but before we do that, Andrew, can you drop your socials so that everyone can like add you or follow you on your Facebook or LinkedIn, and then
Okay. Um,
yeah.
yeah, my social media is at Trandrew Official. So if I look up here, it's this. It's just Trandrew Official, all no caps. But more importantly, you can follow me on the Viet Bites. So I cook Vietnamese food in the Philippines at the moment in Manila. So if you just follow the Viet Bite too, that's probably more important because I don't really post too much on my current social media on Trandra official. I work on the other stuff. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or stuff, just message me wherever. I'll get back to you guys.
All right, for sure. All right, guys.
All right, thank you.
You can thank Andrew in the chat. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
We'll be sending you a lot of stuff right over. All right. Thank you
Cool.
very much, Andrew.
Thanks.
Yeah. Talk to you soon, bud.
Cheers, man. See you.
All right, everyone. So that was Andrew Tran from formerly Liab Esports, and right now he's the CEO of Neurobalance. He's been more active on physical sports right now, and on the side he's just doing esports on the side as he said earlier. So that's it for esports psychology 101. We've been really grateful for Andrew for sharing his thoughts and insights in the USA gaming community. This is his second time right now, and I believe this won't be the last one. Hopefully, right, Andrew? Please don't say no.
No, no,
All right, cool,
I'll
awesome.
be.
Yeah, great, and awesome. So without further ado, we're gonna proceed to our next speaker, a local here in Iloilo. A lot of people know him as Popey. Um, he is the co-founder of Acadarina, and he's here to tell us how he has changed the game. A lot of people are actually excited, chatting me he's the speaker for today. So without further ado, here's changing the game with Justin Banusing, the Chief Operating Officer at Acadarina Technologies and the Technical Product Manager at Pipeline. Hey, Justin. All right, let's watch the stream.
No po.
We can't hear you if you're speaking, Justin.
Yeah, you have to push to talk. I had problems with my push to talk before. Like, I think the service configured to only make sound push to talk.
Alright, oh wait, it's kind of my bad. I haven't changed the settings. You
Okay,
can
how
try
about
now.
now?
Alright, there you go.
Cool. So basically, I was talking this whole time, and then I didn't know na push to talk pala. So my bad, my bad.
Yeah, that's all right. Anyway, let's introduce you again. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the COO of Katarina Technologies and Technical Product Officer of Pipeline. Take it away, Justin.
Hey everyone, Justin here. So I don't get to talk public often, uh, nor do I enjoy talking in public often. But when Aaron decided to approach me for this, I said, sure, why not? So I could share a little bit of our story at Acadarina, as well as hopefully, share some insights on how to help build up your esports career over time. So a little bit about myself. So I grew up here in Iloilo for pretty much my entire life. So I'm currently 21. I spent 18 years in Iloilo. I did high school in Pisay, that's in Haro. And then, yeah, so currently I'm the co-founder of Acadarina. We're a national campus esports network of different organizations and programs across the Philippines. I handle mostly the operations side, so pretty much everything from the day-to-day operations of the office to making sure that everyone gets paid on time. So pretty much everything that has to do with like the back end and like the day-to-day stuff of Acadarina, I do. So currently, I'm a senior at the University of Washington in Seattle, double majoring in informatics and history. So pretty weird combination, but it's a pretty. It's always pretty interesting. Pretty interesting, like doing both humanities and STEM. And outside of esports, I'm currently a technical product manager at Pipeline, a learning platform for streamers. So basically, if you want to learn how to be a content creator, a streamer, an influencer, or maybe a vlogger, you could go check out Pipeline, and then we should have all the resources you need. So without further ado, basically here's kind of like the theme of my talk, which I think I'll keep pretty short since everyone has a long day today. So the TLDR of my talk is that everyone has to start somewhere. So right now, you may expect like the events that we work on at like Academy as a team, or like I myself as an individual work on, to look like this. Like these are a couple of events that I've worked on over the past year. Husky Gaming Expo in Seattle in 2019, Conquest 2019 a couple of years ago as well, and then Shine in Boston 2 years ago. So these are all events I've worked at over the past 2 years. But what you may not know is that I actually started organizing events 7 years ago, or rather 6 years ago, and these are what the events looked. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere we could hold tournaments, we actually did for different games. Actually, like we focused on, I believe, like Super Smash Brothers as well as like other fighting games. So this was a small tournament that we held in a cafe called Fuel.ph. So rest in peace, Fuel PH. If anyone remembers that, let me know in chat. Like that's like one of the older cafes here in Iloilo. Then this was an event that we held at our school that we called ETRAMS. So yeah, if y'all like know what ETRAMS, if y'all know what ETRAMS are for like the Acadarina system, like you'll actually be surprised to know that the word ETRAMS actually came from like this small event that we held in our high school back in 2015. And then this one, on the other hand, is like a janky mall event that we ran, I believe, in 2015 or 2016 at Robinson's Haro. Robinson's Haro, like this. I haven't been to malls recently. Does this look like Rob
Iloilo.
Haro?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Robin.
Yeah, this looks like Robinson's. But yeah, so like pretty much what you might expect the events we look at right now, all actually gradually built up from these smaller community events. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at some of our past events over the past 5 years and share some of the key learnings we've had over time. So one of the first events that we actually ran as like a full organization back when Acadarina was known as ISE Events was this tournament called Acclaim Interschool E-League. So it was like a 16-team inter-high school tournament. I'm not sure if anyone was around for that. So that was pretty much our first foray into like a bigger kind of project. So shout outs to Acclaim for really supporting us back then. We had two tournaments for this. So one League of Legends tournament. I believe like a lot of like the USA players right now for Golden Eagles actually also played in this tournament back when they were in high school. And then we also had like a Smash Brothers tournament. So what running this event actually showed us, or rather showed me, was that one of the key things you really want to do when you're in esports is to find a home community. Finding somewhere where you belong. Because while you might want to like aim for like the broader esports community or like the esports community in general, you're just gonna have a hard time if you don't have a home community where you can actually, where you can a place where you can call home, a place where like pretty much everyone knows you and then you know them. So if I were to go back in time, back when we were starting to do like esports events, what I would actually tell myself is that try to find your community as soon as possible. So I love how a lot of like collegiate students are doing this through getting involved in your orgs like Sage. So that is a very good start. So your collegiate community is a great place for you to learn, grow, and connect. So keep on doing that. And then second, later on that year, we ran this event called Conquest 2017. So it was a little bit of a mini convention in Casa Real. So we actually did that as our high school graduation project. So like our grades were actually tied to that. But that event was a little bit of a wake up call because for most of the part, I was running events or like trying to run events at the very least, like on my own or like trying to like solo carry a bunch of stuff. But what Conquest made me realize is that like a lot of these projects are inherently just team-based things. So the sooner you know how to work with a team effectively, the sooner you'll learn. The sooner you'll be able to work on big things because there's nothing you can do like alone. It's hard to do things alone. It's always good to do things together. And then 2 years later, we ran a much bigger conquest with 10,000 attendees at the Iloilo Convention Center in 2019. So that one was the first one where we started really realizing that this was something that we could actually build a career out of. This was something that we could actually build an industry out of. That the Ilonggo community for gaming and esports is really something that can be big. But what it also made us realize is that at the end of the day, passion just isn't enough. Because the thing about passion is that it's good for you. Passion is really great for you at the start when you're trying to get from like 0 to the first 100 meters. But at the end of the day, when you're working on a lot of the bigger projects, when you're working on like sustained projects that last for years, your passion's definitely gonna run out. Like you're gonna be burnt out. There are times where your passion runs out, and the only thing that can keep you on the right track, and the only thing that can keep you like continuing to do things or continuing to like make progress, is commitment. So I think this is actually pretty late for us. Like this is already like 5 years in. Like this was 5 years in when I realized that passion isn't enough to drive a career in the industry. So what I do tell a lot of people at the start is, please, what I do tell people at the start is that always make sure that you have more than passion when you're coming into this space, because passion is going to run out. Well, passion does refill over time, but it does run out. So that's one thing that I realized while running this. Like, not gonna lie, there were times that I was actually like super burnt out running Conquest, and I think like pretty much everyone on that team who was helping run that event was also burnt out at certain times. And one thing that really could have helped us back then was just not relying on passion. So mini warning flags for people who do want to get into like bigger projects. So yeah, so all of those learnings and how we've worked over the past few years eventually compounded into something, into creating a Katarina, which we founded in 2019. So you already know what a Katarina is. We've been working over the past 2 years to kind of like build campus esports in the Philippines. We've engaged with over 300 schools and helped over 60 schools join our alliance program, and we're just getting started. So a Katarina wouldn't be where it is today had it not been for like all of these past events. So pretty much just summing it all up, things don't happen overnight, so don't be afraid to start small. So whether that's getting involved in your esports org as like a marshal or like a student officer, don't be afraid to start small, because everything has to start somewhere. Second would be to find something you're passionate about and get involved, because finding your home community and finding that home base for you is really important as you continue to grow in an industry. And then third is learn as much as you can. So it's one thing to continue to churn out projects and products, but if you don't if you don't like try to learn along the way, and if you don't try to like really internalize what went wrong and what went right across the various things that you work on, you won't grow. So always look to grow in that regard. And then fourth is don't be blinded by passion, because you will burn out. Like if you're going to work purely on passion, then like newsflash, you are going to like get burnt out. I've been burnt out because of this, and I hope no one else has to. So always try to have a balance between passion and commitment. And then lastly is bring friends along the ride. Like the thing about esports is that it's a people-driven industry. It's not like other industries. Well, I mean, pretty much most modern industries are people-driven, but esports is more so, because a lot of things about esports are interdepartmental, interdisciplinary, and you will need a lot of people to kind of like make it far in the industry. You will need to work with a lot of people. You will need to like know a lot of people. And at the end of the day, it's all about learning how to work, deal, and form relationships with other people that will take you far. And I think this applies not only to just esports, but pretty much any industry. Like one of the best skills you can have is knowing how to form meaningful relationships with others. So yeah, the TLDR of this talk is that just vibe, and then you'll get to where you need to be.
Right, that sounds awesome. Even though it was so quick, like a lot of learnings were jam packed into that talk. We have a lot of people asking questions, but they're actually pretty shy, dude, because they know that you're younger than them, so like they're like formulating good questions to ask. But here are some questions from USA Ratos. He said, "What are the other things needed other than passion, and I guess the drive to or willingness to pursue esports?"
So a couple of things that you would need in order to like go like be an industry professional. So I'm not saying like be a pro player, because like the pro player dream, like as Chandru said, is pretty. It's like it's a shot in the dark. So what I do encourage is more like careers in the industry as like industry professionals, right? So what I think is needed other than passion is number one, skills. So never take your school for granted. Like always like regardless of whether it's like from school or like other forms of learning, try to bring as much to the table as possible and try to develop your skills as much as possible because passion isn't enough. Like at the end of the day, uh, what the industry is looking for right now is professionalism and skills in order to scale the industry up moving forward. Like in the past, most of the people who were hired in the industry were people who kind of like grew up in the industry or people who were like super passionate about it. But as the industry is growing up over time, a lot of companies, like Academy included, are starting to realize that passion just isn't enough. Like like ano bala, like ano ang purpose ng passion mo if wala ka skills, diba? Like
Yeah,
what's the purpose of your passion if you don't have the skills to back it up? So I would
yeah,
say two things to really add on to like your passion is having personal responsibility slash professionalism as well as hard skills. So always take your school seriously, like regardless of whether or not you're like majoring in marketing, majoring in computer science. Like take your school seriously because that'll come in handy if you decide to pursue a career in esports.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Which is why we've been talking a lot about having a degree in esports. Is it really like important on being employed with a degree in esports, or having hard skills outside of esports and then applying it into esports? Yeah,
Yeah.
another question from Mr. Indignant is, in a fostering industry, what is a good entry job for most students to go into esports? So before you go into esports, or
Yeah. So yeah, that's actually a pretty like yeah, like this is before esports or like getting into esports. What do you mean?
what do you mean, Indignant? Oh yeah, he's typing.
Okay, so a couple of things you can do to like get into esports. The reality is that the job market in the Philippines for esports still isn't as big as it can be. Like that's the reality of it because like esports is a growing industry. So for people who want to get into the industry at like a super baseline level, I would say get involved with your collegiate clubs or your collegiate orgs. Like that's the best way to like gain work experience. And then if you're trying to like get into the industry on a more paid level or a more professional level, I would look at freelancer or contractor gigs at different event organizations. So like Acadarina, Goliath Concepts, or like Lupon, like pretty much a lot of like the major event organizations are always like looking for contractors to help service like community moderators, marshals, or yeah, so like pretty much a lot of people do start at like either like serving as like event officials slash event organizers or like marshals, or serving as like discord slash community moderators. So if i
Yeah,
were to if I were to like suggest like entry points, it would be through a bunch of the different event organizations working in their back end. Or if you're more content aligned, I know a lot of the press and media outlets in the Philippines are looking for writers right now. Like One Esports, what's that? Like Esports Inquirer is always looking for contributors. So pretty much pretty much the entry level positions in esports aren't that far naman from like normal entry level positions for other jobs because at the end of the day, esports is just a facet of like the media industry naman eh.
mm. Right. One more question. This is more of a personal question, but like, if ever you were given a chance to like start all over again, would you still pursue campus esports or go pro, like work in the
Uh
back end of pro?
I'd probably still work in campus esports because like funny thing is that I actually worked in professional esports as like a content manager for a pro team
And
before I got into campus esports. So like I actually I've already experienced that and I didn't like it. I would still pursue like the campus esports route. Like I would probably even tell myself to maybe pursue it earlier because at the end of the day, like it's a niche in the local industry that hasn't necessarily been like addressed yet. Like even with Acadarina existing, like it's still something that hasn't been fully addressed yet. And I think it's much better to contribute your skills, contribute your passion towards a problem that hasn't been solved rather than a problem that's already being or has been solved.
yeah, yeah, definitely agree with that. I personally, I would go with campus esports as well because the kids are the future of the country. And yeah, I think staying in pro esports as early, like for example, you're a fresh graduate, right? And then you go to a pro team, that doesn't really assure you that you'll stay there because They'll probably require like loyalty and stuff, and just staying there, just it's probably gonna make you sick. It depends on the on how they treat you, I guess, especially if you're a fresh grad. So working in campus esports is really the way to go if you want to go into the esports scene. Like
I wouldn't
personally
say
for me.
naman like there are different areas of focus for everyone. Like at the end of the day, like the best the yun nga, one of the best things to do while you're still a student is to try to experiment. Like try like the beauty of college naman is that there's two things. It teaches you how to learn, and then college also like provides you with a little bit of a safety net. Na you're still kind of like you're in the real world, but you're not in the real world yet. So what I would actually advise students is to try to explore as many different avenues of esports as possible while you're still in college before you enter the real world, so you actually know like what you actually want to get into. So there are internship and part-time job opportunities at different local organizations, Academy included, Bren Esports included, etc. So like I would say like don't be afraid to like shoot your shot and just apply to these different opportunities, because who knows, like you might actually get accepted. Like for example, like my first job in esports was being a writer for the Philippine Daily Inquirer, like their esports inquirer thing, like in 2015. And they actually didn't even have job openings. Like how
Yeah,
I got that job was I slid into the DMs of like the editor and asked like if you could like potentially bring in a high school student to add as an serve as an intern. So like I'm not saying that you should slide into everyone's DMs, right? But what I'm saying is that like try to find like there are opportunities like hiding in plain sight, and don't be afraid to like reach out to people to see if those opportunities actually exist.
yeah, yeah. That's a crazy story. Like it doesn't happen to everyone, but I believe that your hard skills was actually more than a resume for people to hire you. But yeah, speaking about learning from college, a lot of people actually go to college. It depends on the college, or for example, in our university, not all of the professors are actually mentors to the students. So going back to what you said, the best that you can learn from school is learning how to learn. What do you mean by that? Like, how do you expand on that? On
I
learning
mean,
how to learn. Mm.
I mean, let's be real. Like at the end of the day, like part of college is like dealing with all the BS, right? Like part of college is dealing with a lot of like the janky stuff that comes around. And one thing that I think college students don't get a lot of credit for is like adapting and like learning on the go. Like let's be real. Like no one expected a pandemic to happen. No one expected like like people to transition from like in-person classes to remote classes. But for most of the part, like college students in the Philippines are making it work. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of like college students and like the youth don't give themselves credit for in general, is their ability to like adapt on the go. And I think like that is that is like a thing that college also like kind of teaches you, or rather like like dealing with all the shit that college throws at you is like something that kind of like molds you to be able to learn on the go and learn how to learn learn how to learn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's something I appreciate. One question from the audience. What are you supposed to do when that one thing you're supposed to be passionate about runs out, and is being committed enough, even if you're no longer passionate about it?
Yeah. So one thing that yeah, that's a very good question. Like what happens when your passion runs out? Like is being committed enough? Well, at the end of the day, like if you're committed, like because like what passion does at times is like it allows you to take your 100% to like 150%. But the thing with passion is that it's finite, right? Like it runs out, it refills, it burns out. So when you're like as like to your question, that is being committed enough, yeah, absolutely. Like if you're still committed to getting the job done, and you get the job done based on like the specifications given to you, even if you're not like going like 110%, that's still enough. Like at the like as long as you're able to like deliver on what's being asked of you, like that is enough commitment. Like uh I think one of the things that like one of the big misconceptions about like esports or like any like creative industry is that like the only way you'll succeed is through passion. But that's only gonna like lead you to like burning out and like just giving up in the midway. Like learn to be satisfied with your 100%, rather than like always looking to do your 150%. Like that's actually bad advice because I don't follow that. But but I know but do I know do take a page from that book and like learn to be satisfied with doing enough rather than like going above and beyond.
Definitely. One question from Lunik. I believe this is Academy related. Will there ever be a regulation on players who on purpose repeats their year just to keep playing on varsity esports teams, that it becomes a deterrent to their studies?
That is a very loaded question. That's not my department, but I will I will say that one thing we are looking at in the future is like implementing like grade requirements for players who are competing in like our varsity leagues, like the University Alliance Cup, just to make sure that satisfactory like academic progress is made. So like there is going to be something like there is something like being discussed in the back end for that. But that is a very loaded question, and I think someone else in this chat can answer it. Like Christian or
Christian,
Dalandan or like Carl, like y'all are here.
the
Y'all can
competitive,
answer that better.
the competitive team is here actually. But yeah, I mean, if your goal, actually, a lot of people's goals into entering Catarina is having that scholarship, right? And the scholarship actually has grade requirements, so it's a bad feeling when you repeat your year and then like just to play. That's why Catarina's mantra is not just play. That's why we're having talks like these because it's not just play. But yeah, talking about orgs, we have a question from Kendra. As a developing organization, what can you advise to Sage in taking opportunities that could help its relatively small community grow?
I think the number one thing that a lot of like collegiate orgs aren't doing a good enough job of, or rather like this is what I tell a lot of like collegiate leaders is that I think a lot of them aren't doing a good enough job of like catering to the casual student gamer. Like at the end of the day, syempre, like a lot of us are here because we want to pursue or like explore a career in like the competitive gaming slash esports industry. But a thing to realize is that over 50% of students, like actually 55% of students worldwide, identify as gamers. Uh, so it's actually like more than half of like a student body of like a school typically are gamers. Like you could probably ask like like one of two people, and they'll probably say that they do play like video games, like regardless of like that's League of Legends or like Mobile Legends or something else on their phone like Genshin. Like over 50% of students identify as gamers. And I think like the next step that a lot of like organizations in schools can make, like a lot of the gaming clubs in schools can make, is creating opportunities and finding ways to reach out to like the casual student gamer. Like how do you take your organization from catering to the 1%, like yung mga like syempre yung mga people who want to like go pro or the people who want to be managers, to catering to like maybe the 20% or the 30%, like the people who may not necessarily want esports as a career, but people who follow esports or people who really like playing video games. So I think like for a community like Sage or like communities like LG Esports, which I've told the Ateneo people several times naman, is find a way to be a home for the regular student gamer.
Mm, yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. You guys have any questions for Justin? I believe the chat is typing. What's your thought on Liab Esports?
No comment.
Okay.
I think it's nice that they're bringing in collegiate players like Crescio, Speltz, Kanji, tsaka si Doyden. Doy also played in collegiate. So I think it's really nice that they're providing a pathway to collegiate students to go pro. But it is pretty sad that they finished 117.
Oh god. Yeah. Any questions from the chat still? Santi's actually here. He's from West Visayas University, so he's a guest of ours. Santi, do you have any questions for Justin? I've heard you are a huge fan. Okay. Okay. One more question from the audience. He just chatted me. Do we have plans for Conquest this year?
Does the government have plans for mass vaccination for Iloilo?
Oh my god. No comment on that.
Yeah, that like I will answer your question with a question, and then if that question can be answered with a yes, then the answer to my question is also a yes.
Hopefully mid-year. You know, it's the fifth anniversary of Conquest 2017.
Yeah, so like if we were to run a conquest this year, it would be like December. It would be in the December of this year. So like let me check.
Hopefully,
Let let me check my calendar. Like it would probably like if a conquest were to happen this year, it would be on December 11 and 12 or December 18 and 19. But the reality is that like how many in this chat are vaccinated?
yeah,
Type in chat if you're vaccinated. Like if no one types, then exactly like that's the thing. I like that's the it's not safe to run an event. It's not safe to like bring people together in a mass gathering. If the risk of COVID is still there, like you're just being an irresponsible community organizer.
it's definitely true. Well, if ever conquest does happen, I believe this is an opportunity for like student orgs that didn't exist before. But right now, since the beginning of 2020, like a lot of student orgs for esports have been growing. Like for example, from West, from CPU, from San Agustin, and from ESAT-U. So I believe, do you agree that you know having events or like having conventions in general will give them opportunities to like volunteer, have work experience for a day, something like that.
Yeah, like I believe that running student conventions is really something that's really cool. Like I think that like these kinds of like projects really provide students with opportunities to grow and like learn how major projects work. And even if they're not like conventions, like mini school events are always a great way to learn. Like let me actually show my school's gaming club.
Yeah, yeah. Justin is actually from UW, so if you guys were here like last time, Kevin Wang was a speaker, so he showed their esports arena as well. But you know,
Okay, can someone turn me on to like non push to talk? That would be great.
Ryan, could you do that? Thanks.
I
Yeah.
gave him
So
the role. I gave him the role. There should be no push to talk right now.
how about now? Okay. Okay. I think I'm non push to talk now. Cool. Because I've been pressing G this whole time. So like uh I
Logic.
think like one thing that a lot of like collegiate orgs actually like have a misconception of is that they only want to do like one big event tapos like ganon na talaga na like that one big event and then tapos na, like that will be the thing that will like give them an esports career, that will be the thing that will give them experience. But I don't agree with that. Like I think one way to really build like your experience as an esports industry professional while you're in college is to like run a lot of multiple events. So like one thing that we used to do at UW is like hold like every month we would hold like game nights for like our different like community members at our like esports lab. So like that would be a thing. Like we would just gather everyone and just like play different games, kind of vibe, kind of chill. And the reason why we're doing these smaller events is that it gives what's this? It actually gives a lot of like the younger members of the club or the newer members of the club an opportunity to grow in a more relaxed setting before they go to the bigger events. So like my co-president of like the gaming club at UW, Kevin, is actually here. So shoutouts to like Kevin Lee is in chat right now. And then after we like gathered like after we built up our team and after we built up our club over like an entire year's worth of duration, we ran a bigger convention called like the Husky Gaming Expo, which like to be honest, like I think anyone who worked on this will say that it was hell to run because like running a convention inside your school means dealing with like all of like the school administration, dealing with like all the factors that make up like a normal convention. But yeah, like I would say like running a convention at your school is always a good project to do if you have the resources. But if you don't, like there's no shame in doing smaller community events for you and your community.
Yeah, Kevin's here as well. Good timing,
Yeah,
Kevin.
yeah, Kevin's the one who even like made this album, so like pretty good timing.
Yeah. Indignant asks, in project creation, what's your process in creating novel programs and outreach programs that could help a certain community? Uh, okay, Justin's definitely the project manager guy, so he's gonna answer this question in full blast.
I mean, like to keep it short and simple, it's like pretty much whenever you're thinking of a project or a campaign, you always have to think of like what's the problem that you try to solve. Like what problem or like what need in your community are you trying to solve? Like is there something missing or is there something that's currently not being addressed? And at the end of the day, the best kinds of like projects are projects that provide solutions to things that currently aren't being addressed. So that's pretty much that. Like that's how you should like look into uh creating projects or like creating opportunities for you and your community at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of our problems before in San Agustin was that a lot of people were, weren't very happy with the idea of putting esports into university, because since first of all it's a Catholic university, so like our student affairs officer, Sir Eric, would often say na ay pinapaaral nga yung mga bata, or like they people go here to study, why would you let them play? And then I would always tell him na, when people go out of school, they actually go to computer shops around the campus. So why not make programs out of it, like people that enjoy it, stuff like that.
Sorry, what's the question there?
Oh, that wasn't a question. I was just sharing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's always a little bit of a challenge for like more traditional universities to kind of like sell the idea of like esports and yeah, exactly, like as Kevin said, like sometimes like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to you don't have to like you don't have to like reinvent the wheel or like try to do something incredibly new. You kind of like sometimes what the best thing to do is to just look at what works and adapt it to your context and situation. Like like there's a reason why things work. There's a reason why good things are good things, and it's a matter of like applying those good things to your community and putting your spin on it. But yeah, on the topic of like selling esports to like a school that isn't necessarily like like vibing with the idea of esports, uh one thing to always consider is that at the end of the day, schools always look at like how big a community is and how loud a community is when it comes to like how they decide on like what problems or like what communities they should address within their schools. And how our like kind of like shameless to admit it, but the one thing that our school's esports community did in order to get the school to listen regarding the esports program is that a lot of the League of Legends players actually just started like squatting in the library. So like during like
Yeah,
2015, or 2016, like the club officers that came before me and Kevin, they actually just like played a lot of League inside the school's like library. And then at that point, like the school saw that like, oh, there's a lot of students who like playing video games, and they're also taking up computer space for people who want to use the library. So they decided to create an esports program to cater to those students. So at the end of the day, part of it is also like showing your school that there is like a demand for like gaming and esports. Because like as Aaron said in like a tweet before, like I think he
yeah.
said it in a tweet before, like Catholic universities are the best, are like businesses in the Philippines. Eh.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Cancel.
Whoever tweeted that. Yeah. Anyway. So Santi asked something. Even if he's from Websu, like West Visayas State University, right? He went to high school in Capiz. So Santi is one of the community leaders in Capiz after winning the top outstanding, or the 10 outstanding students of Capiz award. So he plans to make the Capiz esports community better. So his question is like, most schools in Capiz doesn't have an esport org, right? So how can
Mm-hmm.
students pursue an organization if the school is not supportive in esports? Should they create an org outside the school, or like an independent org in our terms at Katarina?
Yeah, like it's like creating an independent org is something that, like, if you feel that there is a community at your school, or like potential for gaming to like be a community at your school, then by all means, like, create an independent community, an independent org at your school to like like for the interest of like fostering the gaming community for students at your school. Like a lot of the major esports organizations here in the Philippines, like for collegiate and even in the US, they all started as like independent organizations anyway. Like DLSU versus Arcus, like shout outs to Dalandan in this chat. Like they
Yeah,
started as an independent organization, and then now they're tentatively approved by their school.
yeah,
In theory, so hopefully that gets finalized. So like at the end of the day, like all it takes to kind of like kickstart these things is for someone to like take a leap of faith. So if you like want to start an esports community in your school, like go ahead and try. like
yeah,
like as Kevin said nga, like like sometimes it's actually better to create like a community outside your school, especially if your school's like super restrictive. Like for
Like USD.
example, like for UST, their esports club can only do Minecraft. Like that's the only game that their esports club can do right now because their school isn't allowing violent games. So what they're doing is
You
that
you don't have to mention that.
sorry, Carl. Pero you are a Minecraft club, but they've decided to like work around that by creating an independent community for the more competitive gamers outside their school. So never be scared about not having official school approval because it's not necessarily the school naman that makes a community. It's the members that make a community. Yun nga lang, having a school back you is something that's also pretty good. So I think San Agustin is pretty lucky that it has school support.
Yeah. Thanks to Sir Eric. Shout outs. Yeah. Kevin is open to DMs. That's cool.
Yeah, and then a question from Stepu here. So esports is usually reserved for young people in their mid 20s. Is there by the way, Santi, like it's yun nga, like it's always good to like even if there's no esports community at your school right now, the fact is like over 50% of students identify as gamers. So uh over 50% of like students identify as gamers. So like odds are that you will find people who are also passionate or like people who are interested in esports at your school who are willing to like create that independent community with you. And then as that community grows, like odds are that your school will recognize it over time. Like it took UST 5 years, 6 years to like for the school to recognize their club, but now like thanks to like the efforts of their Minecraft people, UST gaming is now a thing. So that's pretty cool. But on the topic of like esports is usually reserved for young people in their mid 20s, is there an age limit for someone who wants to join the esports industry? I think that's a myth. Like there are like it's a myth or like a little bit of like a misleading statement that esports is only for people who are young because like there are a lot of boomers in esports. Like that's like just like any industry. It's just that a lot of like the professional players are on the younger side. The professional players are on the younger side, but even then the average age for pro players is like constantly increasing over time. Like in the FGC for like the fighting game community, there are people who are like 40, 45 years old who are still winning like world championships. Like Daigo, Daigo, Kudans from Tekken, like a lot of like the professional fighting game players are like like relatively old for like esports players, but they're still killing it. So there's actually no reason why someone who's like quote unquote old has to like there's no reason for someone who's like quote unquote old has to like not like there's no reason for them not to enter esports because it's like it's an all inclusive space nga eh. So like never be afraid to like take
Yeah.
a leap of faith if you are on the older side.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned this in Coffee Nated, like where there are like fighting game communities now. There are like 5 year olds competing with like 40 year olds. That's a nice demographic to think about. Anyway,
That's a story for another day. But
oh
I
yeah,
will say that one thing that is like popping up right now is age segregation in esports. Because like one thing that did like pop up over the past year is that it's pretty crazy that it's crazy not to think that there are 15-year-olds interacting on the same level as like 30-year-olds in like these tournaments and settings. And I think the next conversation that the esports space has to have then is like putting limits behind like these like age like these
yeah.
different age groups because like there are a lot of creepers out there.
Oh no, yeah. That's definitely another topic for another conversation. Yeah. Last question for Justin. Before we end up is changing the game. He definitely changed the game here in Iloilo. Apparently, he's changing the game in the Philippines. Come on, and probably next time Southeast Asia. Yeah, that's what we've been doing here in San Agustin. Huge shout outs to Justin as well. Like personally, I'd like to thank Justin for like introducing a lot of talents and a lot of like opportunities here in Iloilo. If you didn't bring a lot of things here in Iloilo when it comes to esports, when it comes to like gaming and a lot of these programs in education, Sage did not exist like literally. So yeah, so Justin's a stronghold here. Okay, by the way, Sir Bryce is here from Faith Brave Hearts. Kamusta na po si Payback, sir? I think this is on push to talk, but Yeah, Sir Bryce is here. He's gonna be the next speaker together with Sir Ryan. So, yan. So last question for. Oh, okay lang pala si Payback. Good to know. Last question for Sir Justin.
What's up?
Chandru, did you have a question earlier?
Um, I just want to add that like same thing he said about like before early on about like how he just like slid into the DMs to get something. I think like at the moment, the good thing that the industry is still growing and relatively new, and he's absolutely right about like finding your niche, developing your skills, is that there's a lot of room for growth, and there's so many different like things. Like you see gaming as esports as just a competitive aspect or whatnot, but there's so many different attached things, and as the industry grows, there's like all these adjunct work and jobs that you can do. So for me, for example, like it was the same thing. Like I got into esports because I just shot an email to Mineski, but they actually didn't reply to my email for like a year and a half. And then a year and a half later, I just got this email that was like, "Hey, we got this like Manila Majors is coming to Australia, and a lot of our talents need some help with personal development and stuff." Because this was at a time where like esports wasn't mainstream. There was no like education programs or anything, so everyone was sort of like in the dark with it. So it was this opportunity that came out of nowhere. It was just an email that I sent years and years ago. Um, and they just got back to me. And because of that, I got the gig to help train the esports talents at the time. And I think it's very important that the first job that you do, you really like make sure that you stand out. And because of that, the connections that you build will help open other doorways for you. So just be on the lookout for those opportunities. It might not happen straight away. You never know when it happens, but when it does, just like have the skills. It's very important because I work in like healthcare. That's like my main thing, but I was able to bridge it to esports. So yeah, so you might think that like a lot of your skills are useless in esports, but actually like in any industry, they're always on the lookout for different kinds of talent. So yeah, I think it's really good that that was shared before.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yo, it actually feels surreal that in this small community here at Sage, a lot of industry professionals are right here, like discussing. Uh, you know, it's for me, it's actually like reaching out to people you feel like you can't reach out to, because I believe that I started from there. Na sinabi ko na, the esports isn't really like booming here in Iloilo at the time. So what's the purpose of like reaching out to these industry professionals? But right now, because of these communities, because of campus esports, it's actually easier to like just DM someone or like ask questions straight out the bat, and then people would just answer. So it gives a more inclusive feel to the esports community in the Philippines, and it gives a more broader perspective to students who want to learn more, and I appreciate that. So if there are no more questions for Sir Justin, I believe that would be it. And we would be having a rest for 30 minutes, and then we'll be back for the talk with Coach Fansu, Coach Leo, Coach Bryce, and Coach Ryan. Right? Justin, do you want to like leave your credentials here? Sorry, not credentials, your socials, pala. Yeah, so that people can follow you on Twitter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so my ad on Twitter is at PopeySSB. Unfortunately, I'll never be able to change that because my Twitter is locked. So I don't know why that's my Twitter, but yeah, like if y'all have a Twitter, follow me on Twitter. I'll follow you back. And then if you have a LinkedIn, like I'm not sure, I'm not like actually that's the one thing that I will like leave y'all with. Like if you don't have a LinkedIn already, please make a LinkedIn account. Uh, that is like make a LinkedIn. Like you make a LinkedIn. Like you'll thank me later once you have a LinkedIn. Awesome. Thanks everyone. I'm
Awesome.
gonna
Thank
go
you.
back to Aaron. You have to also Aaron. You have to get here so we can ship the jerseys later. Bye.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys didn't know, Justin's my boss. Yeah, we're gonna work later. Anyway, so that's it for this morning, everyone. So we'll be heading out for a break, probably a lunch break for you guys, for those who are at home, and for those who want to cook as well. So yeah, All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be seeing each other at 1:30. Thank you very much for the morning session. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you guys will spread out to your community what you've learned here so that you'll make better communities as well. Looking at you, Santi. Right. See you guys. Stay awesome. Cheers.